thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. And before we move to adoption of the agenda, I'd like to invite Ramona up to join us at our meeting tonight and to share a few words. Welcome.
Anywhere
You like?
I can sit right
Wherever.
Right.
Come on over.
Good.
I think I am. Well, good evening, everyone. I got my back to you guys, okay?
No, you're, yeah, you're good.
So I am Auntie Mona. I'm one of the elders from the Comox First Nation, and I'm part of the Nanoxville program with School District 71. And I've been with as a Nanoxville elder for probably a couple of years now. Jeez. I finished my job in 2022, so Bruce contacted me minutes within posting I was retired. But I used to be a part of I was the elder that was the representative from KFN. But through different things that happened in my life, it was too much for me. So someone else has stepped in. But the meetings I attended, I must have done it for about a year. And the meetings I attended, boy, you guys sure cover a lot of stuff to take care of our kids with all the different schools and all making sure our kids are, and the parents are all taken care of. So a lot of the things we talked about, it was like, wow, it's so heavy. Like, what do you guys do? So there's this young artist. I used to work at iHouse Gallery. I worked there for 27 years, and I really enjoy helping new artists out. And he's a new artist, and he's Coast Salish, and he is he's got a new website. So when he put his new website out, I was able to see it, and I seen this, and I went, oh, we need that for the room, so that when you guys are all having your meetings and you just need to zone out and just think of something else, you can look here and know that this is a young artist starting out, doing his new creations, and through his schooling and everything that he's gone through to learn how to be an artist and market and all that. But the eagle is loyal, full of lasting love, dedication, peace, and friendship. So what a better way when you're going through some tough stuff and you just need to zone out for a bit to just have a look at that and just collect yourself. Might be what it would be, and then get back into your hard meetings again. But that was my purpose of getting that for in the boardroom. And because with being a part of that for a year, I know how hard it is to be sitting there with all the decisions you have to make as a team and helping everybody. But that was that. Is that it? Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciated when you heard the story with us in our previous location, and it is absolutely wonderful that you've been able to come back to do that with us here tonight. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Phil.
Isn't that amazing? Great, so next we move to the numbered process pieces of our agenda tonight. And the first item is the adoption of the agenda. Trustee McCallum-Keen. Okay, seconder. Trustee Leslie. If there's no discussion, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. The next item is the board meeting minutes for September 24th.
Board of Education School District Number 71, Comox Valley, adopt the minutes from the September 24th, 2024 regular public board meeting as presented.
Seconder, Vice Chairperson Howe. If there are no errors or omissions, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. There is no unfinished business, and we have one record of in-camera meeting minutes from September 24th, 2024, and it was a regular in-camera meeting. In your agenda package on page 13 and 14 is the board chairperson report, the written report. Just have a couple extra things to add. I think most of us thought by our meeting tonight that things would be a little clearer about the recent provincial election, but it appears not quite yet. I'd like to thank everyone in our community who put their name forward to run as a member of the Legislative Assembly. I would also like to acknowledge and thank outgoing Minister of Education and Childcare, Rashna Singh, for her commitment to public education, including the approval of much needed infrastructure resources for Comox Valley schools, school expansions in Cumberland and Comox, and the many childcare centers we have built or are in progress. As co-governors of education, we are eager to learn about the new direction of our new provincial government. We want to continue the good work that must happen to uphold our district values of learning, equity, relationships, safety, integrity, and our commitment to truth and reconciliation. And we will begin our learning and work together tonight with a presentation on the Ignite Youth Climate Conference.
So I'm just really excited to introduce you to Serena Allison, our district teacher with responsibility for environmental and outdoor learning and numeracy learning. And yeah, please share with us about all the collaborative work you've been doing. Here.
So I think you're here. Yeah. And there it is. You can see it.
Perfect. So I was told to make one slide, so I made 11. I realize I have 10 minutes, so so great to be in here again. Thank you. I was here in the spring talking about our cycling program, and I gave you a sneak peek about this opportunity that we're sharing with our youth. So here we go. This is Come Together, the Youth Climate Action Conference for grades 8 to 12. And the planning committee named it Ignite. So like rekindling those passions. And I'll share the story about the previous one we did in a moment. But yeah, we've had a pause with COVID, and we had a great movement. And we feel that now's the time to continue supporting our youth around climate. So this will be happening in November, so it's coming very quickly. We've been planning since the spring on November 14th. Your official invites will be sent out tomorrow, but I wanted to share here first. And yeah, it's going to be a full day, 9:30 till 4. And was anyone there in 2020, any chance? It was a very magical day, and I'll share some of that with you. And if you're able to make it, it's unbelievable being in this space where like-minded youth are together. And we try to make it a really special time and honor them being there and the hard work that they're doing to support us into our future as well. So the purpose of the conference is definitely youth-centered, although we will have community there as well, with a focus on optimism and positive environmental action. We have guest speakers, we have artists, we have music. It will be fun and engaging. And we also have workshops where students are going to be able to share their voices, put their input in, connect with each other, as well as the community members that are going to be there. And the goal is to empower our youth and give them a chance to collaborate with each other around positive environmental change, and also try to collaborate around meaningful solutions for a positive future together with the support of mentors from the community. So just a sneak peek of who will be coming. These are some of our main keynote speakers, as well as, again, we have just under 100 people from the community supporting youth along the way. Luke Wallace is an activist and artist from Vancouver Island, and he's going to MC and kind of weave the whole day together with music and art, with the hope that at the end of the day, we've co-created a song together in response of what he's pulling out of what he's hearing from the group. So you see, those live kind of word arts that people do to capture what's happening in the room. He's going to be doing that with song. Maya Willard-Stepan is going to be joining us, and she is a grad from the Comox Valley and now a climate scientist. So she's going to be sharing our journey and where she's been going, as well as her struggles with climate grief that she suffered through going through her post-degree education. Yolwana, she is from the Lower Mainland. She is a grad that I was connected with through Ellen Kelsey, who was our keynote from last time. And she is sharing and gifting the youth there a project that she put together, not her capstone, but the side of her desk, around positive announcements that you can share in your school about solutions that are happening all around the world around the climate. So she's gifting that project with evidence-based research. So she's going to share that, as well as some of her clothing conscious initiatives that she's also done. She's going to be zooming in from California because she's now there at university. And then Joanna Linger, she's going to be sharing kind of a little bit about her program that's happening at Claremont, but really leaning into how we can rally around community to support us through the effects of climate grief. Because we know from research, a lot of research coming out of Lakehead University by Ellen Field, that the climate crisis is still at the top of mind at our youth. There are many things that are happening, but it is at top of mind. And that is evident the announcement of FIFA today, right? In our elections, it is still top of mind, and we want to show that we're there to support youth, but we're also not at the starting line. We're there alongside them. So just a little backstory. We did do an event like this. This was in February 2020. And we had such a rich environment during that time. That was when we were having climate walks. We had a lot of support at the schools. This was very top of mind for students. And a couple of us teachers were like, hey, let's provide this moment for all of us together. And it was not only students from our area and our district, but we invited some of our sister districts from around Campbell River, Pacific Rim, Powell River, Nanaimo, Ladysmith, Parksville, Qualicum. That's where I first met Vivian. Yeah, so the day was magical, and still people are talking about it today. They have now, most have graduated, and there are still projects within our community that were birthed from that day, working alongside community, talking and engaging, that are still happening today. An example of one is the clothing exchanges that are held at Lake Trail School and some of the repair cafes around town. So it's nice to see how that can get carried forward. And we had, it was another fun day. So we're following that same kind of format as we did last time because it was such a success. This planning has been in partnership with the regional district as well. They've been helping us, and they have two stellar event planners who are helping us along the way, and also are really active within our schools around waste management and water treatment plant and our Connected by Water program. So where our drinking water comes from. So Tina Willard-Stepan and Megan Kersons. as well as teachers that are helping along this. We have a committee from, a teacher rep from every secondary school helping us as well. So again, we're inviting some of our sister districts to come. That registration is full. We have filled all the seats from outside of district and are patiently waiting for those in-house to press the register button. But we know that we have lots of students coming from all secondary schools, including Malotzi, Nides, and Glacier View, as well as Cumberland and Lake Trail. We also have our communities and community mentors and hopefully some guests that are going to come and witness. And, you know, if we're thinking about supporting our youth and our climate crisis right now, we can connect it to things that are happening outside of the Comox Valley. This is politics and sports and youth around the world. And it also connects really strongly to our strategic plan, right? How are we not only supporting youth around relationship building and how to be good citizens within our community, but also as a way of reconciliation with the land and one of those processes. And then the design principles, as you can see there, inclusion, social, emotional, flexible learning environments. How are we connecting that all to what we're already doing? I'm not, well, maybe I could read all this, but we took, I'll let it sink in, but we put a lot of thought around the intention of what we're doing for this day and making sure that every student that is going is hopefully able to see themselves in that day. And not only is this just a one-day event, but it's going to hopefully continue reaching beyond. We have a lot of students very passionate about going into careers that will support a sustainable future. We have a lot of community members that work in careers that are supporting a sustainable future, as well as leaders in our community. And what a great way for them to reach out and maybe support some of their counseling work as well. So thank you for your support as a district, because I could not do this without the support of everyone here. So is there any questions or anything else I may have missed that's very key?
I want to first off, thank you for the presentation and the work that you've done so far. And I know that trustees, there's probably lots of questions, but if we could be brief for the rest of the agenda, just being mindful, you're good. This is hopefully, no, never mind.
Apologize, I will be quick. I am thrilled and excited. And I wanted to just ask if now that we are, of course, past the COVID, is if all goes well, is this an event that we're looking at possibly hosting every year? Or what are your,
For my own
future
capacity.
plans, right? Yeah,
No, that's
this
a
is
great
the
question.
yes.
Well, it's a great question, and also it was brought forward by some other groups that maybe we can rotate around different districts. So we've been very gracious about inviting other districts to come. Qualicum has supported a youth-led climate summit every year that we've also went and been invited to. So likely not next year, but maybe a bit of a rotation. Really builds on those relationships.
Super. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Very excited about the 14th. How many students from our district, what's the capacity of the building in relation to students from our district?
Yes, the capacity of the building is 400 at max, and I made it the seating arrangements to fit the max amount. Last time we had over 300 students there. So we have about 100 seats that we've reserved for out of district and 250 for within district. Yeah. I think we will fill that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Gets this. Not there.
This one, you're not, okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Everybody.
Thank you.
You can stay. Just sharing that our, on November 12th is our next open committee of the whole meeting. And the topic will be the boundary review. and it will be here at 7 o'clock. Look forward to seeing all of you in person or at your home watching from your sofa. Next, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is strategic direction, and over to the superintendent for this next part of the agenda.
Great, thank you. And, it's always great when Auntie Mona is able to join us, and for gratitude for her starting the meeting in such a good way. And of course, the excitement of listening to Serena present on such an important part of the world we're in, and certainly for our youth and supporting their aspirations for a better world. It's a beautiful, beautiful example of some of the great and amazing examples of teacher practice that we have throughout the district. And, when you think about an event like that and the amount of time that goes into organizing it, and that's done really with goodwill just to support students. So tonight I have the opportunity to update the public and trustees around some of our student data over the last school year. Each year in September, school districts are required by the Ministry of Education to submit to the ministry a report. It's now called the Enhancing Student Learning Report. Prior was called the Framework for Enhanced Student Learning. So tonight I want to be mindful that in the board package on the website is a 25-page sort of summary of some of those provincial data sets that the ministry has asked us to report on. I am going to condense that presentation tonight, and what I will be doing is not packing any punches about the areas that we need to grow and where we need to improve. And part of this piece is around making sure that there's accountability to move forward in those areas of concern. I want to point out that the intention as well from the ministry with the Enhancing Student Learning Report is to really understand where some of our priority learners and how some of our priority learners are doing with some of these measures. And so our priority learners are on reserve, Indigenous learners, learners with diverse abilities, as well as child and youth in care. What you won't hear tonight is much reporting on child and youth in care. There are some same with some on reserve data. The numbers are small enough that quite often they're masked at the provincial data level. I also want to share that tonight we're in your board package, all those graphs that are really hard to read are actually pre-populated from the Ministry of Education. So they actually send this report to us with the graphs populated and with an expectation that we do some analysis. So the analysis is School District 71's and the interpretation is School District 71's, but the graphs are actually provided by the ministry. And so I will just share that part of the feedback we will be providing the Ministry of Education is just around improving the scalability of that graph so it's more easily interpreted and understood in terms of numbers and being able to make that comparison between the district and provincial averages. So for the presentation tonight, I'm going to be presenting that data in a slightly different way. It is the exact same data, and this is also graphs taken from the Ministry of Education. These are publicly available graphs, but I think they will capture with a little bit more ease the comparison to provincial averages, as well as seeing and one of the things I just want to surface right away is, and I will mention it over and over again tonight, is that there is a disparity of outcomes in our system. There remains systemic barriers, and we will see a disparity of outcomes in almost every measure between all students and students with diverse abilities and students with Indigenous ancestry. I also want to point out that this is different than the CEO of a company putting up profits and margins and graphs of where we might need to improve. I really want to handle this conversation with the understanding that every time we share data about students, we're talking about human lives. So when we talk about grad rates, we're talking about students who spent years in our system and didn't graduate with the same dignity, purpose, and options. And so just acknowledging that. And then we also look at provincial comparisons, and to be quite honest, sometimes we might feel okay because we're doing okay with a provincial average, but the provincial average is not something that we would want to stop and celebrate. So I just want to acknowledge those pieces before we get going. I also want to acknowledge that these are some of the provincial data sets, and we do look at our literacy and numeracy assessments that are through the FSA, grades 4 and 7. As you can see, the participation rate can impact the legitimacy or interpretation of some of these results. So we're not getting 100% or anywhere near 100%. But what you'll see, and I just want to share, so over the last 5 years, our district has been wherever that line is on the screen. So when you look at this line, that is a 5-year average for our district, and the circle is where we were last year. The gray represents sort of the average range of school districts in the province. So if you're outside of the gray, you would be above provincial average. If you're inside the gray, you're within the provincial range. And if you're on the left side, you would be below provincial average. So it's not the most elegant or precise, but it gives an idea. And I think part of the rationale is to recognize that the merit of the FSA is really around a provincial trend and a district trend. It is not as useful for identifying specific needs of individual learners, which is what our school-based assessments are for. And I would also acknowledge, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what you can see there is that we are reflecting a provincial story, which is a consistent decline post-pandemic in literacy and numeracy outcomes. While we might be close to provincial average, or we're in provincial average, other than with our Indigenous learners, we are on a sliding scale. And I think of particular concern is that over the last 3 years, we've seen a decline in literacy results on the FSA, and particularly a precipitous decline last year in our grade 4 Indigenous learners on the FSA. I would also acknowledge that the provincial trend has been troubling enough that the provincial government last year committed to $30 million for literacy-specific professional development for teachers and support staff to try and stop this downward trend. Again, just really noting the huge discrepancy in the opportunity gap between our all students and Indigenous. And I also want to specify that when we look at all students, this top line actually includes our Indigenous and diverse ability learners. So if it was actually disaggregated where it said non-Indigenous, non-diverse, you would see an even greater spread. So just acknowledging that when we're talking about, hey, maybe it's a 20-25% difference, it's actually more significant than that. I'll talk briefly about grade 7. Literacy, again, this one a little stronger in terms of district results, which is that we're within provincial average. And last year, we did see an improvement in grade 7 FSA results for students who are on track and extending. That's what this means. Anybody who's, when we're in here, this is on track and extending. So when we look at that, we say, well, 70 or 69% of our grade 7 students are on track or extending in literacy according to the grade 7 FSA. And again, you can see that we have a huge discrepancy in outcomes between Indigenous and all students and diverse ability learners and all students. Within that, to note that it is mass data, but the grade 7 literacy data tracks closely Indigenous resident students not on reserve tracks closely with all resident students, which has a bit of a V-shaped 3-year trend with 2023-24 reaching back to the 2021-22 levels. So we are seeing a slight improvement in the district in grade 7 FSA results. The masked Indigenous students on reserve data, which means that we have too small of a cohort, but it does indicate relatively large swings in achievement due to extremely small cohort size. And again, that data does indicate, though, that there is an opportunity gap between this priority population and Indigenous student population not on reserve. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
I'm
that's
just,
okay.
I know that, I just want to make sure, can everybody see the slide data? Except Sarah Jane and myself? Because I don't think if we turned the lights down, that the video was going to be able to
Do you want to try?
see the screen, and I'm looking at Josh when I asked that question. So, okay, so if everybody, well, I don't want to impact the recording or anybody in the room. So I think I'm just going to move. And if you want, I'm just going to move down and stand down at the end so I can see it. Because I can't read that and I've got a big glare going on that. So I'm going to chair from over here.
Hey, I hope I don't speak so long that you start looking for a chair at the back of the room, but I do want to just note, I mean, it's important, but we'll be as expeditious as possible. I do want to share some really positive results ultimately, which is around our grade 10 literacy assessment. We continue to have students at the far right of the provincial average. We do see a decline in results for our diverse ability learners in the Literacy 10 assessment. And note that the Massed Indigenous Student on Reserve grade 10 literacy graduation assessment indicates much higher success rates than the provincial average and higher rates than all students in the last 2 years. That's an important note. The Indigenous grade 10 assessment for literacy data indicates that while the School District 71 district data tracks higher than the provincial average, a persistent opportunity gap exists between Indigenous students and all students. And we can see that very clearly. The difference there, I believe, is between 65 to 75%, so 10% discrepancy. And we often see double digits in terms of that opportunity gap. Grade 4 numeracy, and this is where we can't really feel too good about being within provincial average when the number of people in the provincial average who are on track or extending in numeracy on the grade 4 FSA is between like 35 and 55%, or between 38% and 55%. So the results of the numeracy component of the grade 4 FSA indicate that there is a downward trend across all student populations for the last 3 years, and students with unique needs and Indigenous students are experiencing a greater opportunity gap in numeracy learning in comparison to peers. The Indigenous student grade 4 numeracy data indicates a 3-year trend downward, which is accompanied by a persistent gap between this priority population and all students. The results on the numeracy component, yeah, I'll say that. I think you can see, again, some concerning trajectory in terms of our grade 4s, both literacy and numeracy, on a clearly downward trajectory, which ironically is a little different than the news to share. Well, it's still a bit downward. The numeracy outcomes continue to extend in grade 7 beyond the provincial averages. However, again, when you're looking at provincial averages that are on track and extending that are below 30%, I don't think we could rest without saying that there's a tremendous amount of work to do. And you can see that we're in the middle range of where we've been over the last 5 years. And there is some high fluctuations with on reserve grade 7 numeracy data, again, due to small cohort size. And then the Indigenous students not on reserve grade 7 numeracy data has increased slightly from last year, which is again above the provincial average, but only at the 50% mark. When we look at the grade 10 numeracy assessment, we can see that students are, the all student average was an improvement over the last 5 years, with approximately 50% of students on track for extending. The Indigenous grade 10 grad assessment for numeracy data indicates, while we are above the provincial average, it is considerably higher than 2 years ago, that there is a persistent opportunity gap, again, that exists between Indigenous students and all students. And again, although the data is small and it's masked, the data does indicate a gap, opportunity gap between our on reserve and Indigenous students not on reserve. So that is the end of the exciting FSA result piece. I think I wanted to share, I think what it tells us between the grade 4, it's not the end of the presentation, no, sorry, Chair Wade. Just part 1 of the presentation, we have 2 exciting components to it, but I just wanted to add that it does indicate between those assessments that there is a continuing need for growth across all student populations and grade levels in both literacy and numeracy development. That aside from the Indigenous grade 10 grad assessment of literacy outcomes, the district's approaches are currently underserving Indigenous on-reserve and off-reserve students. Therefore, we are required to collectively uncover and address the systemic barriers to success for these priority populations. And particularly of concern is the 3-year downward trend for grade 4 Indigenous and all students in literacy and numeracy. Acknowledging that a very small cohort size greatly impacts the data reflecting Indigenous students living on reserve, aside from some promising outcome data found in grade 10 literacy and grade 7 numeracy, there remains a persistent opportunity gap for this priority population. We need to continue to analyze the numeracy data for collective capacity building to ensure that our Indigenous students are equitably served and systemic barriers are acknowledged and addressed by all SD 71 staff. And so those are why the FSA is an important tool for looking at some of those trends, both provincially and at the district. I wanted to share some other district data. This is district data that we do, or not district data, ministry data that's taken through the Student Learning Survey. And so this is connected to human and social development. And so we're going to look at 3 survey questions that the ministry asks us to report back. And so I want to just walk us briefly through this data. The question of, do you feel welcome at school? And we have on this graph data that's disaggregated between elementary and secondary, as well as all students and Indigenous students. And in this case, we can see that over the span, while we're again within those provincial averages, or in some cases just above, that you can see last year, elementary students reported an improvement in terms of feeling welcome at school, as well as our both all students and our Indigenous student population. We see a decrease in secondary. So while the elementary students, that would be grade 4 and grade 7, students in grade 10 and 12 share a lessening sense of feeling welcomed at school last year. The same question, do you feel safe at school? In this case, is only disaggregated between elementary and secondary. And there is additional data in the ESLR report shows an increasing trend of feeling safe at school for elementary and secondary students. What we can't see as clearly on this graph is that Indigenous students not living on reserve in grades 4, 7, and 12 indicate a stagnant 3-year trend. So it's very, very level. District data is above provincial levels, but the gap between the priority population of Indigenous resident students and all students actually increased between the years 2021 and 2023. And this is in grades 4 and 7, which shares not only is there a persistent gap, but over those 3 years, the gap actually increased slightly. There is some promising pieces, which promisingly grade 10 Indigenous students not living on reserve have trended upwards over 3 years and have exceeded all students for the first time in the school year of 2022-2023. Again, while students who feel safe at school, Indigenous resident students not living on reserve, grades 4, 7, and 12 indicate a downward trend, but Indigenous students have actually seen a 20% increase in feeling safe at schools, and that information is now at 82%. Is school a place where you feel like you belong? And again, I can say that we are above or within provincial average, but I mean, all 3 of these questions, if we're not at 100%, indicates that there's work that needs to be done. So when we consider who has a sense of belonging at school, the Indigenous resident students not living on reserve indicates a rising 3-year trend of positive responses from a low of 34% to 54. And again, is above all students for the 2022-23 school year. However, grades 4 and 12 indicate a concerning downward trend with double-digit disparity when compared to other students. And again, although the data is masked, our on-reserve three-year data trends indicate a concerning gap between this priority population and Indigenous students not living on reserve. And I'm going to conclude with the 6-year graduation rate, but I want to talk about the 5-year graduation rates as well, because I think the 6-year graduation rate is typically the graduation rate that's shared by the province. You will see that we're on the very low side of the average in completion rates, and just recognizing that this includes data from NIDES in the slide, and which can complicate the accuracy of the 6-year graduation rate. What we have is that we do have some transient enrollment in NIDES. Many students enroll in NIDES and then return to their home district, which can result in overall district completion rates. When we remove NIDES data from our 6-year completion rate, we're actually much more, we're very close in the approximate range of 90%, which is close to the alignment with the provincial average. The Indigenous, and I want to point out the 6-year grad rate for Indigenous students was 77% in 2022-23. But again, a persistent gap between this priority population and the overall student population. But I think it's important to share some data that you can't see, which is some specifics with regards to our 5-year completion rates. The Indigenous resident 5-year completion rate indicates a 3-year trend that's moved downward from 63% to 56%, accompanied by a persistent gap between this priority population, all resident students, which is hovering at around 80%. So you can think of the graduation rate disparity of approximately 34% in that population. I also want to point out some other concerning data that you can't see here. Although our Indigenous student population accounts for approximately 16% of our overall population, our Indigenous student population accounted for 38% of all adult graduations that were handed out in the 2021-2022 school year. Furthermore, in the 2022-23 school year, Indigenous students accounted for more than 50% of all students in alternate programs. I share those pieces because it's a clear indication that we continue to have students whom we serve face systemic barriers within our system, and it speaks to the work that's necessary. The data reveals that there are and remain longstanding barriers to equity that are persistent for Indigenous learners that we are fortunate enough to serve when compared to all students. So there's some good, there's some bad, and there's some really uncomfortable data. What does it mean moving forward? I really appreciated Serena with her slide talking about how the Ignite directly connects to some of the design principles and action plan within the strategic plan. I do believe that as we become laser focused on improving outcomes for students, which is the sole goal of the strategic plan, which is to enhance students' competencies, that we will start to see those dramatic shifts and increases in student achievement. I believe that the work around alignment, and I believe that the work we're going to do around aligning our practice to the values and to the action plan and the strategic plan will fundamentally shift things for students. And I also think that without intending to set up the meeting in this particular way, I also think that it is absolutely a perfect setup for why we need to do an equity scan, which will be Joe Heslop presenting next. And I think that piece around the importance of that work can't be understated as we look to improve outcomes for all students in School District 71.
Thank you. Please have any questions or comments? Trustee Payton?
So thank you for the report. I guess I have two questions and a concern. And when I looked at the intellectual development summary on page 23, it's saying that generally the results of all the provincial assessments needed growth across student populations in literacy and numeracy. And we are, I guess, provincially it says that the growth rate is going down. Is this a result of the pandemic, or is there something greater involved in how we're supporting our teachers and our students that we're noticing a decrease in our numeracy levels? Because that seems to be standard for the children in our district. It's a concern. And the second to follow up is that where it states regarding the district's current approaches are underserving our Indigenous, on-reserve, and off-reserve students. Therefore, the district was required to collectively uncover and address the systematic barriers for success for these priority populations. And I'm wondering what process or what processes will we do to support that and look at those remarks?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, to be as clear as I can, our district data really is in alignment. It's almost parallel to the provincial data in terms of the downward trajectory in literacy and numeracy. I think one of the complicating factors is the peak of FSA results was actually in the pandemic year, because it actually, or whatever, it was done so late in the year. So typically they're administered now, and we actually, due to a number of delays because of pandemic response, I think it was a 21-22 school year, we actually did them very late in the year. So I think that some of the decline is also associated with a false high. However, there is a clear downward trend. Again, it's concerning enough that the Ministry of Education has actually allocated that $30 million line item for over the next 3 years to help look at and address that provincial decline. So it certainly is reflective of the provincial trend. I think that, again, I think it's just too bad that there's probably other questions. Otherwise, this would be a perfect question to set the stage for Joe, Associate Superintendent Heslop, to come and talk to about some of the specific ways that we intend to uncover some of those systemic barriers and start to address those pieces. I also would share that I think some of that work around looking at how we can decolonize and indigenize education as part of the action plan within the strategic plan is part of the solution as well. So,
Are there any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Thank you for summarizing that, and I appreciate the two ways that it was presented. It's more fulsome in terms of certainly my understanding. You mentioned that when you're talking about all students, that includes our Indigenous learners, and I'm assuming that also includes the students with diverse abilities?
It does, yes.
Designations. And so in which case the same logic would apply, that if both groups were desegregated from the total populations would stand even higher. Is that?
That's correct.
And I'm curious, I'm really looking forward to the equity scan presentation coming up too. But I'm wondering, do we have thoughts or concrete steps in terms of how to be addressing some of the just the lesser results that are being achieved by our students with designations and diverse abilities?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I missed in the presentation was over the last couple of years, and including this year, moving forward with the implementation of a district-wide literacy and numeracy framework that actually also accounts for a variety of interventions depending on what the needs of those students are. So potentially a student with a designation may receive like a tier 3 intervention, but identified early. I think I think there'll be further presentations this year where Associate Superintendent Collier will be able to speak to the kindergarten and grade 2 new assessments that are in place this year to help ground really specific and targeted interventions for individual students. I would just again add too that with the FSAs, they give us a really good trajectory, overall trajectory of overall district achievement and provincial achievement, but those local assessments and classroom assessments are critical to support students who require specific interventions. And so, there is a plan. I don't think I can answer in depth to all of the ways in which we're supporting students with designations, but it certainly is something that is in those frameworks.
Just curious, a general question around children and youth in care. Like I know certainly heard come up at some provincial tables that we've sort of been in and conferences around a lack of evidence sort of accessible at this time, and that I'm just honestly curious if you feel right now like the district is needing that advocacy at a provincial level, or if you do feel like sort of internally it's working right now for us.
Yeah, it's a great question, though. Thank you. I think that there continues to be some struggle in communications between various ministries. So we don't always have up-to-date and accurate lists of who is actually a child and youth in care. I would say that there's been an effort, but that there's still a need for improvement there.
Two questions. When do we receive, so I know the FSAs are in progress right now. When do we receive the data? And do we have the ability to pivot during the school year? That's my first question.
Not with the provincial data, just with local internal data. So we get this populated graph came to us in June. We still don't have, we have a how are you doing report that is up to date as of 2022-23, so it doesn't yet have the 23-24 school year. So we still are waiting for some data from the last school year.
Okay, and then my second question is, in my memory and some of the information on the good work that we're doing in numeracy and literacy, are we able to catch all the students going through the district, like through the grades? Are there, like, there's some work being done at the younger years, but is that work, are there going to be some, how are we making sure that we don't have gaps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, these are probably opportunities for even more fulsome discussions. The reality is the literacy frameworks for K-12, obviously focusing on early intervention is essential. We know that students who are reading at grade level at the end of grade 3 not only have fundamentally different results in school, but have different life chances. So really wanting to ensure that that those supports are provided as early as possible. It basically alternates, like kindergarten, I believe is literacy assessment, grade 1 is numeracy. We have a grade 4 FSA, grade 7 FSA, but we're doing internal district-based assessments when there isn't a provincial-based assessment in those off years. I think the reality is that the FSA is a useful tool to tell us the direction we're going, but it's not as useful for us to diagnose specific interventions student by student. And so, like, if we're using the FSAs as our sole indicator of individual students' progress with literacy or numeracy, it will underserve us greatly because the results don't come in a timely way. And so the FSA really is a tool designed to actually help us see how are we doing, but it's not the more granular you get with the FSA, the less useful it is. It's useful the farther away you go. So it's useful at the province level, it's useful at the district level. It can be helpful at the school level, it gets less helpful at the classroom level and less so at the individual level. And that's where individual school-based and district-based assessments are critical for specific, targeted, meaningful intervention around literacy and numeracy with students.
Okay.
I was just wondering, it says in our analysis and interpretations for Indigenous students not on reserve, the district rate shows a significant improvement over the years. This could be due to targeted interventions and support systems in place. And it talks about the positive trend, suggesting that the overall education environment for Indigenous students not on reserve may be improving. Do we know what those interventions are? Oh, sorry, which page 32 and 33, sorry. Do we have any feedback or know, what interventions or support systems are working and helping our students, so that we may look at expanding such interventions and ones that maybe aren't as beneficial?
It's a great question. I don't think I can adequately do it justice, but what it does, I believe we're referring to there is around post-secondary transitions.
Yeah.
And so what it's saying there is students not on reserve, we have been seen an improvement. I think one of the pieces that I would just acknowledge, it's actually a slide I didn't end up showing, but we are and have over the last several years put a tremendous amount of renewed focus on the careers program and different ways of really intentionally targeting specific priority populations for some of the career opportunities. Again, it's an opportunity to give a shout out to NIC. In the 2018-19 school year, we had 51 students that took a dual credit course through NIC and the school district and our school district. And in 2022-23, we had 129 students taking dual credit. So we're just seeing increased access to some of those career programs and post-secondary transition pieces. However, just noting that while we're seeing improvement, our actual post-secondary transition rate as a district is lower than the provincial average. Now that one of the difficulties with that is it also, when we get information from the ministry, one of the things that they do miss is the inability to track students who transfer to post-secondary out of province. So there are some gaps even in those data pieces. So a student that graduates from here and goes to school in a different province simply will not show up as a post-secondary transition. So it's limited in terms of that. But I do believe that that increased focus is what is likely trickling in. And, although this is a comment specific to Indigenous students, here's what we do know. Like what works for students with diverse abilities, what works for students with Indigenous ancestry is good for every student. So when we talk about priority learners, we're actually talking about learners who need us to do business a little differently that will actually benefit all learners. And so just recognizing that when we talk about prioritizing a group, it doesn't leave another group behind. It lifts all groups as we move forward. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I think this is the important work that we do. I appreciate all of the information provided, including the information about the persisting gaps and the urgency. And you're right, the segue to an equity in action presentation is perfectly timed. And I think this is probably the most fulsome report of what was FESL, now is Enhancing Student Learning report that we've received. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Motion.
All right, so with that, Jeremy, would you like to introduce this next piece of the equity in action? Sorry.
Absolutely.
There's a motion.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a motion? Yes, there is a motion. Thank you, Trustee Keaton. Are you moving the motion? Thank you.
The Board of Education, number 71, Colfax Valley, 24, SC 71 Enhancing Student Learning Report, ESLR, dated September 2024, as presented.
Second. Right, thank you. That was after I finished telling trustees earlier about my trick to make sure that I wrote down that the motion was moved and seconded, and then I didn't do it. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. All right, that gave you time to turn to your agenda page.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. No, thanks. No, it's just a pleasure to introduce Associate Superintendent Joe Heslop, who is a lead in the work around the equity scan, and we'll be presenting on some of those next steps tonight.
Forgot something I need to bring up here. Might ask a question later as to why I'm bringing this up here. I'll have to give you the answer. Thank you. I was listening intently to your presentation and thinking about the barriers, and I'm thinking also about how it leads into this presentation I'm going to do. I want to be really clear. I was very nervous yesterday. Less so today. I was extremely nervous because I was presenting a similar presentation to the IEC, the Indigenous Education Council, and I was very nervous because ever since I heard I got this job, I knew how important the equity scan is, and I've seen how great it can go and also how terrible it can go, frankly, across the province. So really want to get it right. And I'm pleased to see they are, the IEC is in favor of some of the ideas that we put forward in camera. And so I'm going to get to some of that, but I just want to temper my own expectations in when I'm thinking about the gaps, and we're talking about addressing these gaps. These are long-standing gaps, and we're talking about deep transformation, radical transformation for everyone in the system. And while I'm buoyed by the people who are in the leadership positions here, I am cognizant of just it requires every single one of us to do some deep learning. And that's a big ask, and we're going to do it. So here we go. This slide here just is from the 2015 Office of the Auditor General report, page 37. It's just reminding us sort of what I was talking about there, the racism of low expectations for Indigenous learners. It's across the province. It exists everywhere and here. So it's why Equity in Action came about in the first place. I'm going to quickly walk us through the 4 pillars. And the reason why I was nervous yesterday speaking to the IEC is because I have lots of ideas as to how the questions I'd like to ask, the work plan, the approach that I would like to take, but it's not my approach. It has to be community led. And it's very important that whenever I say there are questions attached to these 4 pillars, those questions have to be driven by community. We have workbook questions. We've got lots of great templates from the ministry and other districts, but community must guide the process. So I'm going to quickly walk around the wheel. So when we're looking at these 4 quadrants really quickly, the pedagogical core is basically a number of questions that we would ask folks within the system. So teachers, principals, students, community, guided questions around how are we embedding Indigenous worldviews and perspectives in the curriculum K-12? Are we doing a wholesome job of that? Are we going local first? Is it tokenistic? Where is it? And are we doing a great job in elementary, less so at secondary? We have to uncover these things. The learning environment, it's not what you think. It's not whether we have the First Peoples principles of learning on the wall. It's how we view Indigenous kids in our class. It's that bias, privilege awareness, anti-racism. Where are we in our journey for all of us? And I'm talking everyone, bus drivers, secretaries, secretary treasurers, all of us. Policy and governance. So which policies and governance structures are maintaining or reducing barriers for Indigenous learners? And there are designed questions specifically around that and our action to take care of that. The learning profile is around data. So we were just looking at this data, but are we thinking about all of the data? So ministry data, classroom data, district data, and then also whose responsibility is it when we see gaps? We're creating structures to ensure that we're building capacity within the system. Is this just the work of the Indigenous department, the one Indigenous support worker in your school, or is it all of our responsibility? These are going to uncover uncomfortable truths. I expect pushback, but I'm coming at this with a good heart. And I believe everyone has a good heart out there and in our system, and we'll embrace it. Really very quick history. This project started in 2017, 2018, because we found the enhancement agreement process was wonderful, but it really just landed on the Indigenous district principal's desk, and then everyone sort of looked at that as that's the Indigenous department's work, so we created the Equity in Action scan then. The following year, we had another 15 districts added. The year that I joined the Ministry of Education was in 2019, 2020, auspicious beginnings with COVID on the way. And we had 30 districts engaged in equity and 30 not. Very helpful for data. So you could see the districts that were moving the needle on equity and those that have not been introduced to it yet. And that would include us and a few other districts, which I was able to drive out to every one of our remaining districts across the province, engaging with the Equity in Action Project. And that's where we came in 21-22. We had a start, and we're starting again. That's how I'm going to leave it with that. So we're starting again, and we're here. We're creating an equity scanning team. That's what I was nervous about yesterday. And then I had other community members share with me an idea of a proposed equity scanning team. I have it in my hand. I have emails that are coming out early tomorrow morning with too many attachments and links for the folks that are going to be joining us on that equity scanning team. Just to briefly go through what this looks like. So really just going around the wheel, and you'll notice it's on a wheel, and that's important because it's an iterative process. We're not going to scan and then fix equity in a year. We fixed it all. I mean, that would be great. I would love a raise if that happened, and I think I would deserve it. However, I haven't seen it done in any single district across the province. So that's where I started with tempering the expectations and knowing this is internal change for every single one of us. There's not going to be a magic bullet. There is some low-hanging fruit, and we'll find it. I'm already finding it. We're talking about targeted strategies. There's lots of deep work. This is going to be tenacious work. So let's go through the wheel really quickly. So the scanning team, who are they? The big question where I ended yesterday's presentation was this slide. Who isn't here that needs to be? So folks on the IEC suggested hereditary chiefs need to be there, students need to be there, an elder needs to be there, and we need to have more Indigenous voices representing all of the partner groups than non-Indigenous voices, because often it's the opposite. When we're doing this work, it's usually one or two Indigenous folks that are doing this. If we're going to guide this work in a meaningful way, we have to do this, and that means we have a place for truth. We conduct a scan. That's what keeps me up at night, because I want to get started like 3 months ago, but I know that we have to have community drive this. So I'll give you, honestly, I've been scanning since I got here. I can't help it. I'm meeting people, I'm scanning. That's just how it works. But we're going into the culture and the norms of the district, those unspoken assumptions, and those questions, and we have rubrics, we have examples, which I was flogging throughout the province, but lots of it is in EduSpeak and some of it is not community friendly. So we do have also examples from other districts that we work with that have community questions. So our community can take a look at it and say, yeah, these look like good student questions. No, they're not. We're going to create our own ones. But essentially, this is assessing our strengths. What are those targeted strategies that are working? Let's amplify them. But what are the areas where we are falling down on our collective responsibility? We create a district equity profile. So we're looking at ST71 like we'd look at a student, right? We have strengths, we have stretch points. Where is that? That's the inventory. So even in the workbook, and admittedly it's a Western construct, but we do have a rubric. So we can judge ourselves. We can say, yeah, I think we're extending here. We're working on things. And there may be different areas where we're doing great things. So this sets the stage for the action plan. This creates our theory of change, right? So once we've seen what our findings are from the scan, and I think I might have an idea already as to where to lean in with our questions, who to ask, how to ask those questions. Community will guide me and point me in the right direction. This will essentially be a statement of our intentional strategies, right? Our actions, our goals. And when I say our goals, I don't mean the district's goals. I mean the goals that community says, this is the areas we need to change, and these are the top 3 things we want you to work on next year. And then it's our job as the district to do that work. And this is what we would commit to. I don't like the word final, but here we go. The final expression of the equity scan. This is the commitment. This is where it says, here's a courageous document. We are going to do this to address the needs, these gaps. And knowing that we're not going to have that magic bullet, but that we're going to make targeted strategies, assess, come back to that work. I do want to say it's really hard to go through something. I'm used to talking all day long with everyone and to turn this into 15 minutes. So if I'm talking fast, just letting you know I'm caffeinated, there's a lot to go through. Here's just 2 sample questions when we think about the learning environment. So, because I found learning about the scan is tough, right? Like, what are we doing? What are the questions? So these could be questions that we might ask, like, what are the stories told about the schools at the community level? right? There are these stories that happen. What's in the parking lot? We need to know what that is. So we got to go to the parking lot. We got to ask the right people these questions. If we go to the pedagogical core, are in issues of implicit racism and bias raised and addressed as possibly impacting the nature of our instruction, assessment, and learning for Indigenous learners? Too many stories that I have as a teacher, when I was a teacher, that fell down on the job, not teaching the wrong stuff in the wrong way to kids, and then not knowing what their gifts were and thinking, and then marking them for it. It's like, that was on me as the teacher. Great stories I'd love to share maybe another time over a pot. Policy and governance. So these are some questions we might ask of ourselves. I just did 2. There's many. There's usually about 7 questions, but we could have alternate questions. Do we have a policy related to access for Indigenous language and cultural programs? Do we have an anti-Indigenous racism policy? Don't know. Be great to have one. There's all kinds of things that we could look into, models from other districts as well. Down the road, CIATSIS has got a great, that's a great policy, and Nanaimo Ladysmith. If I had time, I'd show you the video from them. It's beautiful. The learning profile, again, talking about data, I mentioned this. What systems are in place for keeping track of achievement of Indigenous learners? So those of us who watched me 2 weeks ago talk about the LEA structures, that's what we're talking about. We're building capacity throughout the system. I can see already that Power BI is going to be a big deal. Building capacity with principals, vice principals, in sharing that data, and then all of us knowing and keeping our eye on the kids. And it's not just going to be someone at the board office, not just going to be the Indigenous district principal, it's all of us doing the work. So these would be the questions that we'd want to know. What are we doing here? What needs to be done? Okay, so after reading through literally hundreds of equity action plans, and they're rather thick documents as well, where we look at those targeted strategies, lots been done, lots of things, but I would say these are the 8 key themes that I've seen over my 5 years at the ministry, where districts have actually made a difference, where it hasn't been tokenistic, hasn't been, okay, we want better grad rates for Indigenous learners, so let's give all adult dogwoods. That's not addressing the racism of low expectation. Commitment and tenacity is the big one. This is hard. I said it was hard. There's pushback, but we keep going. We don't stop. It's going to require a lot of resilience from all of us, everyone in this room. It's hard, but it's important. Collective responsibility, I've spoken about that. Being able to hear the truth, the uncomfortable truths in ways that make you feel uncomfortable, but you listen anyway. You don't stop and shut down. All of us. Connection to community, what does that look like here? How many of us have been to KFN? Probably talking too long. How many of us have been to the Friendship Center? Great questions. Maybe for the scan. Bias and privilege awareness, impact for respect for Indigenous worldviews and perspectives in education, that's key. So are we holding up Indigenous values and education as equal to and not less than Western ways of knowledge? And evidence-informed decisions when we're looking at data. And then having essentially the last point is around humility. Can all of us just look at each other and say, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm a principal down the road. Jason, what do we do? I've got this suggestion, or I'm a teacher in the classroom. Tell me what to do here, Sean. I've tried everything. That's the kind of humility that we need. We can't pretend we all have the answers, because we don't. Those gaps exist. So this has way too much text, but this is what I want to share is, this was my idea of my work plan. This is the stuff that's been keeping me up at night. How do we get the data? Who are we going to ask? It's all about the kids, all about the elders. It's all about going into community and finding ways to get the data that you want. And I'm going to end. I know you're looking at me like maybe the hook is on, Jeremy. So do I have time to share 2 minutes of a video? I do?
I'll give up some of my time.
Okay, here we go. Say you're the best.
Yay.
The kids have said they would love if the teacher didn't know anything about Indigenous education.
But they stated it, and they said, I know I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm really trying. I wasn't taught this way.
Also would say to educators who are anxious about making a mistake or offending someone, find a couple of colleagues to walk with you. Don't do this alone. And continue to do your homework. And know that we are all making mistakes. Because we're going someplace that we've never been before. We're creating a system that has never existed. So we are going to stumble and be humble. It's okay to say, yeah, messed up, and I'm sorry. I'd like the privilege of trying.
The thing that keeps me going when I think of the painful stories is thinking about the young ones that are yet to be born. And we have an opportunity to change the school system so that when they come, we will finally be ready for them. It won't be, are they ready for school? Are we as an education system ready to support them in an equitable future for all of us, not just some of us?
And that is the end of my presentation for equity. Thanks.
Tell us about Fox.
Come on.
You can have a couple more minutes.
So I brought this box because I was thinking about, I mean, I bring it everywhere. It's in my office. Everybody that knows most of the meetings that I have, I usually have the center, I have this at the center. But when Carrie and Jeremy hold their meetings with senior leaders, this box is at the center of those meetings. And now we've come, I think as a leadership team, we've come to, like, when we look at that box, we all know what it means, right? It's the kids. It's the kids are at the center of every decision we have. So it's like what Ramona was saying about this beautiful eagle. It's like, it grounds us. And so, you know, we have hard decisions to make, but I think we have the right people here and the right heart. And so if we can just remember those kids for every single decision, when we have that pushback, when we're talking about changing the way people were raised, that's hard work. But if we can have leaders that value and model this, I'm looking to you because I know you do, but I'm thankful that you do. I think that some of the things, those gaps that we see that feel like the impossible are not impossible. So we have to be modeling this. So that's something that and this box has medicine in it. It has all kinds of things that are good medicine for me, but that's why I brought it today. And I'm thankful for the leaders that are in this room that also walk and support this work too. So yeah, that's why. Thanks for the question.
We have a lot of work to do with the equity scan. And Trustee Leslie and I had the privilege of being the trustees at the IEC meeting yesterday. You talked a little bit about timeline. I'm wondering what the next steps are to share, and when, and how often will the board and our district community be updated?
What I would say is the next steps are tomorrow, sending that information out to the group that they suggested who to be at the next meeting, and get that meeting happening yesterday. They felt like they needed this meeting to happen yesterday as well. And once we can get that a lengthy meeting going to say, this is the direction you're going in, it's not hard for me to start analyzing data. There's lots, and there's more conversations. And what I would say is we do have some things in our board work plan, but I would say anytime the board wants to know what's going on, how far we've got, what's the next plan, who are you asking next, I mean, it's literally happening all the time. So I'm reaching out to Sean saying, when are we going to meet next week? Let's talk. We want all of our partners, right? Talking PVPA. These are important partners. This cannot be seen as a thing that is, oh, this is the board's new thing. This is our thing. It's every partner group. So I'll share whenever. You can't get me to shut up. So I'll come back.
Thank you, Joe. Was there any other questions or comments from the trustees? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if you'd be able to share your presentation with us so we can read the point and everything.
Absolutely. I'll give you the work plan. It's a draft. It's a draft work plan. I'll give you the presentation, but it's all the ideas that I have. The committee might say, we have some better ones. And that committee includes hereditary chiefs as well. So.
Thank you so much. Ms. Leslie?
I just wanted to thank you for your leadership and the deep understanding that you have regarding the importance of our local First Nations and rights holders, Indigenous community in leading the direction of the scan, where their voices are heard, seen, and felt in a way that perhaps hasn't been heard before. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Weilalen.
For the box?
Very much.
You up there.
Get up there.
Oh, there you go. We have a motion before us.
The motion.
Okay.
That the Board of Education, School Board of 71 Comox Valley, received the Equity in Action briefing note dated October 22nd, 24, as presented.
Okay, and seconded by Vice Chairperson Howe. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? And that's no opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Next, we have an enrollment update by our Associate Superintendent, Jay Dixon. That's what the agenda tells me.
Yes, I'd like to thanks Joe for really kind of inspiring the room. Your energy is contagious, and this box here, our youth, our learners, is really what motivates us and really connects to the next two agenda items. So I will be brief. I would like to share a little story about our enrollment. For some of us in this room, we've gone through years. I look at the first 12 years of my career in declining enrollment. I'm pleased to say that the Comox Valley continues to grow at a moderate rate. So we've grown approximately 135 students this year in our brick and mortar schools. That's close to our projected amounts. So that is something we can manage and get excited about moving forward. If that was a 1,000 students, we'd be panicking. But this is something that kind of motivates us, those new learners that are joining us, kind of guiding their trajectory throughout our schools. So I'm typically the guy that reads out all the data and numbers. So I'll give you some of the numbers. We anticipated that our brick and mortar schools would grow this year from about 8,477 to 8,612. At the end of September, we came in at about 8,580. So that's that 135 number. The other layer of our enrollment that I mentioned last month is our career education programs and our online learning, which exceeded their numbers. for September, the end of September. And just this afternoon, we're finalizing our 1701, our kind of final numbers. And it's looking like, together with our brick and mortar that I mentioned, and our online and career, that throughout the year, by the end of the year, we should kind of hit our anticipated number of approximately 11,000 for 2024, 2025. So that's online learning and about 8,500 of our in-person within the Comox Valley. That also doesn't count the students from all over the world that come to the Comox Valley with our international student program, which we have about 230 of them in our high schools and one in a middle school. So that is my brief verbal report. I'm very optimistic moving forward.
Are there any questions? Did you have a question?
I was jealous.
Okay. Okay.
So questions on the age range of the students and incoming students. We look at our kindergarten to our graduating, sometimes an indication of our numbers over the years. So are you saying the students came in this year, were they all like K to 12, or were there a certain group at that elementary or the secondary? Because that also has an impact on our schools and our numbers. So what was the general consensus of the grade structure of the students that are entering our district this year?
Great question. We'd have to analyze that a little deeper because we also have outgoing. So most of these 135, I'd say, trended towards our secondary, but we'd have to dig a little bit deeper to get into that area. We're starting to see, as we presented on a couple years ago, we were seeing great growth in elementary. Guess what's coming for secondary school soon? That are, I'm not going to use the word full, are busy elementary schools are finding their way up through our secondary schools now. Yeah.
Don't see any other hands raised. So if you would like to move, there's no motion. If you would like to move forward, I believe you yourself and our Director of Operations representing on the public engagement of proposed boundary catchment adjustments.
So there is a detailed briefing note on what we've embarked on around a boundary update. Just wanted to start off with thanking the team that's been working on this for over a month now with reoccurring meetings, and also community that on Fridays started to provide input and feedback online, and some members, many people in this room who have helped guide our team moving forward. There's much detail in that report, but I'd like to kind of backtrack to its origin story. About a year ago, or last spring, we started getting phone calls from panicked parents, new people to the Valley, and those that were moving, saying, well, I just rented an apartment beside Superstore, all those big apartments, and they were quite stressed. It says here on this school district website that I have to go to this elementary school to enroll. Guess what elementary school it was? Aspen Elementary School. So, I live in the area and I started thinking, who would ask their child to go from Superstore all the way across the Comox Valley to Aspen Elementary School? But sure enough, our boundary catchment maps weren't updated. And what was once a big field, the entire, the estuary is actually currently connected to Aspen Elementary. So we started through the catchment cross-boundary reviews, we started listening to parents' wishes and assigning them to other schools. But it's somewhat of a stressful process to request a boundary change. So that's one of the pieces, if you can visualize that, we're trying to capture the new developments in that part of our community to a more appropriate, what we're proposing is a more appropriate school. And this is what parents are already, many are already requesting. We had similar requests for across from Quality Foods. So across from Quality Foods, that big new development of houses, which is going to have many more townhomes and apartments coming in very soon, feeds into Airport Elementary, which, you know, we couldn't in good conscience, if someone bought a house across the street from Quality Foods, which is a few hundred feet away from Airport Elementary, ask them to, or from Aspen, ask them to go to Airport Elementary. So we started getting requests last year. And after our team dug in more, there's going to be a lot more development in that area. So you'll see that in the briefing note. And thirdly, you'll see a big clear cut at near the roundabout near the airport. That area eventually will have many new homes. And we are trying to get in front of that development. And we're proposing that that area go to the closest school to it, which is Airport Elementary. So that kind of is a story behind that long, detailed briefing note. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there was an opportunity for trustees at another forum to ask questions as well. So I'm hoping if there are no questions that we could move to the motion.
Well, that the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley received the public engagement on proposed boundary catchment adjustments update briefing note dated October 22nd, 2024, as presented.
Seconded by trustee Masak.
Please encourage people to go to the website.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And how many hits on the website?
I've been in Vancouver for the past couple of days, so I haven't checked.
800 as of yesterday.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
And really thank the team for those interactive maps. They're wonderful.
Thank you. Moving on to the Secretary Treasurer page of the agenda package. Secretary, would you like to begin your portion regarding the executive compensation disclosure report?
So on page 47 through to page 55 is the executive compensation disclosure report. And I will just give you a little bit of information about that. It's a report that ensures transparency and accountability in reporting the compensation for executive employees in public education, which is in line with the Public Sector Employers Act, and overseen by PSEC, the Public Sector Employers Association, and they mandate this public disclosure to promote public trust. School districts have to report the compensation of executive employees annually for the period of July 1st through to June 30th. So you have the most recent report in front of you. It must include executive employees defined as the superintendent and the next four highest ranking senior employees earning an annual base salary of $125,000 or more. And also within that report is a written portion that talks about the philosophy of compensation in K-12. So, and an attestation letter that is signed by our board chair, simply acknowledging the compensation that has been paid.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the trustees? I will say that this feels like one of the most thorough documents on this topic that I recall receiving. So thank you very much for your and your team's work on this. If there are no questions or comments, I would look to a trustee to, go ahead, trustee Mysak.
That the Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley received the Executive Compensation Disclosure Report for the 2023-2024 reporting period, acknowledging the compensation paid to senior leadership.
Thank you, and is there a seconder, please? If there's no further discussion or comments, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Your next item?
The next item is on page 56 through to 60. It's the pay transparency report. And I'm just going to give you some highlights around the report as well. I decided to dig into it a little bit because this is the first report that we've been required to do. And it's also interesting that we are talking about equity tonight with respect to our learners, because this is a little bit of equity information around our employees. So BC has one of the highest gender pay gaps in Canada, with women earning 17% less than men, according to 2023 Stats Canada data. And the gap widens for Indigenous, racialized, and newcomer women. This disparity in the broader gender pay gap across sectors prompted this introduction of the pay transparency legislation, which is aimed at pay equity and reducing systemic discrimination. The Act currently mandates that organizations with 1,000 or more employees provide these reports, and I think it's by 2026, employers with 50 or more employees will be required to report out. Some of the key findings in the report, based on our data, is women earn 96 cents for every dollar men earn, indicating a 4% pay gap between men and women. Non-binary individuals face an even larger gap, earning 89 cents for every dollar men earn, reflecting an 11% pay gap. With regards to overtime pay, women again receive significantly less in overtime pay, earning only 79 cents for every dollar earned by men. And women occupy, this is interesting, but probably not surprising. Women occupy 71% of the highest paid jobs, but they also make up 80% of the lowest paid jobs. Now that's because of note, our workforce is predominantly occupied by women. So I think I'll leave it at that because you've seen the report, but I thought it might be helpful to have a few of those other statistics and a few highlighted for you. And I think that we'll work with human resources at one point to probably create an action plan around pay equity, review our overtime practices if we are able to, and then it also leads me in the direction of career development and mentorship for marginalized groups to see if we can change these statistics. But it'll also be helpful to have more reports so that we can make comparisons. My little.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feeling a little bit like Joe right now.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for highlighting that. Much of what you highlighted, I have highlighted in the document. So thank you for raising that. If there are no questions or comments, looking for a mover of affirmation. Trustee Nestle.
And a comment. Mary, I'm curious about if a hiring exemption, Section 42, might support marginalized groups in terms of closing the gap for our school district.
Not sure. I'm looking at our Director of Human Resources to know whether or not we have any sort of an exemption right now, but I do know that some school districts, some boards have passed motions that would say that we will hire, for instance, the same percentage of population that we have in terms of Indigenous students, that we would, I mean, that would be a lofty goal. But we can do the work around that. Is that is in essence your question?
Yes.
Yes. And, but if I can ask, Sheila, do we have any exemptions right now?
We don't currently, but this is very, very timely. At our most recent HR meeting this week, we were actually talking about that very topic, wanting to see how to get there. And so it's very, very timely. It's on our minds to start that journey. Absolutely.
I will say that I think it's helpful when a board makes that kind of a motion.
Question. Seeing no hands raised, again, looking for a trustee to move the motion. Trustee McConnell-Keen.
I will move that the Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley, receive the pay transparency report as presented on October 22nd, 24 by our strong leader, Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. And seconded by Trustee Maysack. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Put that in the wrong spot. Look at that. I'm just going to share that it's 8:41. And we have a fair bit to move forward on in the agenda. So we will see how far we get through this next agenda item, but we may need to pause to extend the meeting depending on the time. So I'm not sure who is doing the introductions. Is it yourself, Sheila, for this next section? Can you, I'm not sure if the microphone can hear your voice. Would it be possible to come closer to a microphone if you're going to do the introductions? Is there one there? Wonderful. Thank you. I couldn't see it.
Well, thank you. So I'm Sheila Powell. Everyone in the room. And this is Yinka Adewale. He's our Health and Safety Manager for School District 71. And I wanted to start by giving credit to Yinka for working through the administrative procedures, looking for health and safety references to make sure that they're as up-to-date and current as possible. So thank you, Yinka, for doing that. You'll see that there's a lot of markups in the documents, and they might lead you to believe that we've made significant changes, but I hope to give you a quick overview to demystify that, because there's actually some real similar changes, and they're just carried through all of the documents. So for example, on page 61, Administrative Procedure 160, Safety, what you're seeing there is that the previous AP only referred to a portion of the Workers' Compensation Act or a portion of the regulations, and we've elected for the entire act and all of the regulations because they all might be applicable at one time or another. Also, where the APs refer to a health and safety officer, we've updated that to manager because that's Yinka's title. I don't know if we've ever had an officer, so that's interesting wording. Another example you'll see throughout these documents, but it's in AP 160, is we've exchanged the word accident for incident. And that's intended to clarify that all incidents might require a review or an investigation, not just things that are accidental in nature. And then if I flip to AP 160 Appendix B, First Aid, which starts on page 67, this is where you see an awful lot of markups, but primarily what the naming configuration for occupational health and safety first aid courses changed. They used to call them OFA 1 and OFA 2. Now they call them basic first aid and intermediate first aid. So that's really what predominantly all those markups are, is to make sure when our readers read them, they're looking up the right information. Then the one thing in the same AP, but let me find the page for you, is the rates of pay. So that starts on page 70. And I recently went through these, and I wanted to bring to your attention that although if you look at on page 71, 12.2.2, it it identifies correctly the rate of pay as being pay grade 9, step 2, and they're referring to the QP collective agreement. That's accurate. But what I realized when I was going through this document is after that, when they're actually quoting dollar amounts, they're quoting the dollar amounts that agree with that rate of pay at the time that the AP was written. And then since then, we've had multiple negotiations of the collective agreement, and those amounts are no longer accurate. So just one example, 12.3.1, it lists teaching staff with basic first aid getting 68.25 per month, when in fact that amount today is 112.08. So what I wanted to suggest, if we're in agreement, is that instead of quoting dollar amounts throughout the document, we just refer people to the pay grade rate in the current collective agreement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then if I flip to AP 160, Appendix C, where that is. Oh, never mind, I'm still in first aid, sorry. Okay. We've done some things in here about clarifying that incidents should be reported immediately as quickly as possible after the occurrence. And then you see references about the software. We're currently using a software program called Prismatic, and that's where everyone can find the incident forms. It's also where first aid forms, hazard reporting, site inspections, and JOSH meetings. So it was important that if people are looking at the APs, they're referring to the right software where they can access all of those. In addition, we updated what used to simply be referred to as safety plans to our modernized language that we use throughout the district so people can understand what we're talking about. So a safety plan for a student is called a positive behavior plan. And for staff, it's called an employee risk reduction plan. So I was just wanting you to see, it looks like a lot of markups, but it's really about updating all of the wording to the current information. And then I think lastly, AP 160 Appendix D. There we go, safety inspections. You'll see it's more the same things that I've already mentioned, referencing Prismatic, WorkSafe BC, and Yinka's title from officer to manager. And then in 175, sorry, I'm on page 93 now, if you're following along. The most significant change here, and I really appreciate that Yinka did this, is he actually added the definition of violence, which wasn't there before. And just so you know, this is pulled verbatim from WorkSafe BC. So we've not created our own definition, but used theirs. And that is all of the things I wanted to highlight and bring to your attention.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from any of the trustees? Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you so much because, you know, ensuring that these tools are up to date and accurate for staff and for anybody in our community, because some of these documents are online, is really phenomenal. And so it's nice to see, and it's one of those tedious jobs to go through all the APs. And I know we're doing some policy work ourselves. So this is really great. And thank you very much for taking the time to do that.
Thank you to you both. And when you make those other adjustments, is just, there's a cleaning up, ensuring that it's gender neutral would be
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed not just these APs, but others.
As they're touched, and I know you had some suggested changes
Yes.
on the APs that you presented to us, so just in addition.
Absolutely, love to.
Make the motion that the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley receive the revised health and safety administrative procedure as presented on October 22nd, 2024.
Seconder, trustee Campbell-Kin. No further questions or comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. It is 8:50. Shall we keep going till 8:55 to decide if we need to make a motion?
See how fast we can make these motions.
I don't want to, looking at trustee Alden.
I know.
There is, if you're going to speak to your report.
That's all in the report. I'd like you to read it or not.
I'm wondering if there's a trustee that would like to make a motion to extend the meeting up to an additional 30 minutes. Great, thank you. Did you hear that? Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Hopefully not, but thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 10, board standing committee reports. We have the open committee of the whole report from October 8th. Looking for a trustee to make a motion. Go ahead.
Board of Education of, or that the Board of Education of School District 71 receive the open committee of the whole report dated October 8th as presented.
And the seconder, trustee Leslie. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. I'm not asking for negatives if I see all the hands, so everybody knows. Moving on pages 99 and 100 is the ad hoc policy committee report to the board. Looking for
that motion as well.
Okay.
The Board of Education of School District number 71 Comox Valley received the ad hoc policy committee report to the board dated October 10th, 2024 as presented.
And seconded by trustee McConnell-Keen. Are there any questions or comments on the report? Being none, all those in favor, please indicate. Thank you. We want to pay, and the next ad hoc policy committee meeting is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024 from 4 till 5:30. Next, we're moving on to board business agenda item, and we have the trustee report from the Gender-Based Violence Committee.
Chair, this is just a short one-page report. Providing a quick update that our committee has now met twice, first in June and once in October. Our June meeting was really one of introductions only. Our work began our last meeting just earlier this month. We reviewed district policies and administrative procedures thus far that relate to gender-based violence in our district and are now reviewing exemplars from the few other school districts with such policies, as well as a sample from a few post-secondary institutions. We have been reaching out to our district counselors to schedule meetings and also with members of community groups. And we are looking into ways to encourage some youth voice as well as create some type of survey or information gathering from others in our district as well as community and partner groups. And we continue to expect to be able to report later this year with key themes and findings, identifying gaps and opportunities in the areas of policy, education, awareness, and prevention. And our next meeting is November 6th.
Very much. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? report. And I was thank both Vice Person Howe and Trustee Aldinger for your work on that committee on behalf of the board. Next, we have on pages 102 and 103, the draft board committee reports, board committee placement, better word, I guess, for 2024-25.
Move that motion.
Okay.
That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley approve the 2024-25 board committees as presented.
Trustee Leslie is the seconder. Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. It's carried. Next on the agenda on page 104 is the 2024-25 trustee school liaison placement. We made some changes, not a huge amount.
The Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley approve the 2024-2025 trustee school liaisons as presented.
Trustee Aldinger. And seeing no hands raised for questions or comments, all those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, the IEC met yesterday. Trustee Leslie, was there anything you wanted to share?
No, I think Joe covered it. So thank you.
Thank you. We do not have any cards. We do not have any emails that have been forwarded to me that, okay, so there are no emails that have come forward for public question period of the board. So I will turn to the public that is present to see if there are any questions from the public that are here tonight regarding any of the many agenda items that we covered.
I just want to say thank you. You guys all put in all the work.
All right.
He told her to say that. Jesus, what I said.
Great. Okay. All right. So with even the motion to extend the meeting, we are at 8:58. Yeah. I worry a lot. So, and I want to thank everybody. This was a full agenda. Every single item on the agenda is as important as the other. And trying to balance that, I always feel like I never quite get it right. So if a trustee would like to move adjournment. Go ahead.
The Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adjourn this meeting.
Seconder, Trustee Leslie, all those in favor? The meeting is adjourned and just